Without a picture, he ordered a male bride, and a woman twice his size appeared at the altar. He was the kind of man people rarely noticed, not because there was anything wrong with him, but because he lived quietly, spoke little, and never demanded attention. His days followed the same pattern for years. He woke up early, prepared a simple breakfast, went to work, returned home, ate dinner alone, and slept. Weekends were no different. Sometimes he watched television, sometimes he walked through the local market, watching families and couples pass by, feeling like a guest in a life that never included him. He had tried to change his situation before. In his younger years, he believed love would come naturally. He thought one day he would meet someone at work, through friends or by chance. But years passed and nothing happened. When he did try to talk to women, things never went far. Some were polite but uninterested. Others made it clear they were looking for someone different. Over time, rejection became familiar, and hope slowly turned into acceptance of loneliness. As he grew older, the loneliness felt heavier. Nights became the hardest. The silence in his home felt loud, almost painful. There was no one to ask how his day went, no one to share small moments with. Even simple things, like cooking a proper meal or celebrating a birthday, felt meaningless alone. He didn't blame anyone for this. He believed maybe life had simply chosen a different path for him. People around him assumed he preferred being alone. They saw him as independent and calm. No one knew how much he longed for companionship. He wanted someone to sit with him at the table, someone whose presence made the room feel alive. He didn't dream of perfection. He only wanted understanding, honesty, and peace. One evening, while browsing the internet without much purpose, he came across a discussion about international marriages. At first he ignored it. The idea felt strange and distant, but curiosity pulled him back. He read stories of men who had found partners through marriage services. Some stories were happy, others warned of difficulties. Still, one thing stayed with him. The idea that somewhere in the world, someone else might also be lonely, hoping for a chance at a new life. For weeks, the thought stayed in his mind. He didn't rush into anything. He read carefully, trying to understand how these services worked. He wasn't chasing fantasy. He knew life was not a movie. He understood marriage required effort, patience, and responsibility. But he also knew doing nothing would change nothing. What surprised him most was his own honesty with himself. He admitted that fear had stopped him before. Fear of rejection, fear of being judged, fear of failing again. This time, he didn't want fear to decide his future. He told himself that even if it didn't work, at least he would know he tried. Eventually, he contacted a marriage service that focused on matching people based on values rather than appearances. The process involved letters, background information, and long questionnaires about life goals and expectations. When asked if he wanted to see a photo of the woman he might be matched with, he paused. This question bothered him more than he expected. He thought about how often appearances had influenced his past experiences. He remembered how quickly people judged each other based on looks, including himself. He asked himself what truly mattered to him now. The answer was simple: kindness, loyalty, and honesty. After a long moment, he chose not to request a photo. It wasn't because he didn't care at all about appearance, but because he didn't want it to control his expectations. He believed that if he started with an image in his mind, he might miss the chance to see the real person behind it. This decision made him nervous, but also strangely calm. As weeks passed, letters began to arrive. They were written in simple words, sometimes imperfect, but full of sincerity. The woman spoke about her life, her struggles, and her hopes. She talked about wanting stability, respect, and a partner who would treat her as an equal. She didn't promise happiness without effort. She didn't pretend life would be easy. Her honesty touched him. He replied carefully, choosing his words with respect. He spoke about his routine life, his quiet nature, and his desire for a peaceful home. He didn't exaggerate his success or hide his flaws. For the first time in years, he felt like he was being seen, not judged, just understood. Still, doubts followed him. Late at night, questions crowded his mind. What if she regretted it? What if they were too different? What if people laughed at him? He imagined standing in front of strangers being measured by their opinions. These thoughts scared him, but they didn't stop him. He reminded himself that every important decision carried risk. Staying alone also had a cost, one he had already paid for many years. This time, he chose courage over comfort. As plans slowly moved forward, he told a few people close to him. Reactions were mixed. Some were curious. Others were openly critical. They asked why he would trust a stranger, why he would marry without seeing the photo. Their words made him feel small, but he didn't argue. He knew they spoke from their own fears, not his reality. Inside, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, hope. Not the loud, unrealistic kind, but a quiet belief that life could still surprise him. He didn't expect miracles. He expected effort, misunderstandings, and challenges. But he also expected companionship, and that was enough. As the wedding date was set, his emotions became tangled, excitement mixed with fear. He practiced simple conversations, imagined shared meals, and wondered what kind of future awaited him. He didn't imagine a perfect bride. He imagined a human being with strengths and weaknesses just like him. On the night before the ceremony, he sat alone in his room, surrounded by silence. But this time the silence felt different. It was filled with anticipation instead of emptiness. Whatever happened next would change his life forever, and for the first time he was ready to face it. The days leading up to the wedding moved slowly, yet each one carried a new kind of pressure. After making his decision, there was no turning back. His routine life no longer felt empty, but it no longer felt calm either. His mind was always busy. At work, he made small mistakes because his thoughts kept drifting. At home, he sat quietly, imagining moments that had not yet happened. He wondered about her often, not how she looked, but how she spoke, how she smiled, how she handled stress. From her letters, she seemed strong and thoughtful. She had faced difficulties in life and spoke openly about them. She did not ask for luxury or comfort. She asked for respect, safety, and a chance to build something stable. That honesty made him feel closer to her, even though they had never met. Sometimes, curiosity tried to push him to ask for a photo at the last moment. The option was still there. One simple request, and all uncertainty would disappear. But each time the thought came, he pushed it away. He reminded himself why he chose this path. He didn't want expectations to control his heart. He didn't want to measure his future with shallow ideas. I would be so happy he wanted to meet a real person, not an image. Meanwhile, the woman on the other side of the world was also preparing. Her life had not been easy. She had learned early that the world could be unkind, especially to those who did not fit its narrow standards. She had spent years proving her worth through hard work and patience. When the opportunity for marriage came, she did not see it as an escape, but as a partnership she hoped would be built on honesty. She knew people often judged her before knowing her. That knowledge made her careful but not bitter. In her letters, she chose truth over decoration. She shared her fears as well as her hopes. She believed that if a man accepted her words, maybe he would accept her fully. Still, as the wedding day approached, she felt nervous. Acceptance on paper was one thing. Acceptance in person was another. Back in his world, conversations with friends and relatives became more uncomfortable. Some spoke kindly but cautiously. Others were blunt. They asked questions that carried doubt rather than concern. Why rush into marriage? Why trust someone you have never met? Why choose someone from so far away? He listened quietly. He did not feel the need to explain himself anymore. What hurt him most were the unspoken thoughts he sensed behind their words. He knew some people imagined worst-case situations. Others imagined him as desperate. A few assumed he was making a mistake he would regret. These judgments stung, but they also strengthened his resolve. He realized that people often fear choices they would never dare to make themselves. At night, he prepared his small home. He cleaned more carefully than ever before. He arranged furniture, thinking about shared space instead of personal comfort. He bought simple household items he had never needed before. Each small task made the future feel more real. The house no longer felt like a place he returned to. It felt like a place someone might arrive at. He practiced patience with himself. Some days excitement lifted him. Other days fear returned. He imagined standing at the altar waiting. He imagined awkward silences and unexpected emotions. He imagined judgmental eyes. But he also imagined kindness, quiet understanding, and small moments of connection that no one else could see. As travel plans were finalized, the reality of the situation became undeniable. Soon, a woman he had only known through words would step into his life. He wondered if his letters had shown him clearly. Had he been honest enough? Had he hidden his flaws too carefully? He hoped she would see him not as perfect, but as sincere. The woman also faced her own challenges. Packing her belongings felt emotional. Each item she chose carried a memory. Leaving her familiar world behind required courage. Some people supported her decision. Others warned her. They spoke of risk, loneliness, and disappointment. She listened, but her heart was steady. She believed that respect and honesty mattered more than fear. On her journey, she reflected on the man she was about to marry. His letters had been calm and thoughtful. He did not promise things he could not give. He spoke about routine, responsibility, and quiet happiness. This reassured her. She did not want drama. She wanted peace. As the wedding date drew closer, communication became less frequent. There were logistical details to handle, documents to complete, and arrangements to confirm. The silence between messages felt heavier now, but it was not empty. It was filled with anticipation. The night before the ceremony, he could not sleep. He lay awake, listening to the familiar sounds of his home. But everything felt temporary now. His life was standing at the edge of change. He questioned himself one last time. Was he ready? Could he handle judgment, misunderstanding, and uncertainty? Then he thought about the years he had already spent alone. He thought about the quiet meals, the long nights, and the absence of shared moments. Compared to that, uncertainty felt less frightening. At least, uncertainty carried possibility. At the same time, in a distant place, the woman also struggled to sleep. She stared at the ceiling, thinking about tomorrow. She wondered what kind of life awaited her. Would she be welcomed? Would she be respected? Would she be able to call this new place home? She did not expect perfection. She expected effort from both of them. Morning arrived faster than expected. The day carried a strange calm. He dressed slowly, his hands slightly unsteady. Each movement felt meaningful. This was no longer a distant idea. This was the moment he had chosen. As he stepped toward the place where the ceremony would take place, his heart was heavy but hopeful. He did not know what the future looked like. But he knew one thing clearly. He was walking forward with honesty, and whatever happened next would be real. And somewhere nearby, the woman was also preparing to walk forward, carrying her truth with her, ready to face a world that had often misunderstood her, but hoping this time would be different. The place where the ceremony was arranged felt unusually quiet that morning. Chairs were set neatly, flowers were placed carefully, and a few guests stood in small groups, speaking in low voices. The man arrived early, standing near the front, unsure what to do with his hands. His heart beat faster than he expected. He reminded himself to breathe slowly. This was the moment he had chosen, the moment he had prepared himself for. People glanced at him with curiosity. Some knew his story, others only knew parts of it. A few smiled politely, others whispered, trying to guess what kind of woman would arrive. He avoided eye contact, not because he felt ashamed, but because he wanted to stay focused. He told himself that whatever happened next, he would face it with respect. As minutes passed, his thoughts became louder. He imagined many possibilities. He imagined feeling surprised, confused, maybe even overwhelmed. But he also imagined standing calmly, accepting what life placed in front of him. He had promised himself that he would not turn this into a moment of judgment. This was not about meeting expectations. This was about meeting a person. Then the room shifted. The quiet changed. People turned their heads toward the entrance. The doors opened slowly. She appeared. For a brief second, time seemed to stop. The woman who walked in did not match what many people had silently imagined. She was confident in her steps, dressed simply but neatly. Her presence filled the room in a way no one expected. She was larger than him, broader than what society often celebrates, and impossible to ignore. A wave of whispers spread across the room. Some guests exchanged quick looks. Others tried to hide their surprise. A few stared openly. The atmosphere became heavy with unspoken opinions. The man felt his chest tighten. This was the moment his fears had quietly prepared him for. He heard the whispers even without understanding the words. He felt the weight of many eyes on him, waiting to see how he would react. His first emotion was shock, not because of her size, but because reality had arrived so suddenly. For months, everything had been words, plans, and ideas. Now, there was a real human being walking toward him, carrying her own history, courage, and vulnerability. For a brief moment, doubt flickered in his mind. It was not cruel doubt, but human doubt. He wondered how this would look to others. He wondered how his life might change in ways he had not imagined. He wondered if he was strong enough to face the judgment that would surely follow. Then he looked at her face. Her eyes were calm but cautious. There was strength there, but also uncertainty. She was aware of the room. She knew people were judging her before knowing her. Still, she walked forward with dignity. She did not rush. He did not hide. In that moment, something inside him settled. He remembered the letters, the honesty, the respect, the way she spoke about life without bitterness. He remembered his own promise, to choose character over appearance, sincerity over fear. He realized that this was the true test of that promise. If he turned away now, he would not only hurt her, he would betray himself. So he stood still. He met her eyes, and slowly he smiled. It was not a wide or dramatic smile. It was a simple one, filled with reassurance, a smile that said, "I see you." A smile that said, "You are not alone here." The whispers did not stop, but they no longer mattered to him. The room could think whatever it wanted. This moment belonged to two people, not to an audience. As she reached the front, she paused briefly. For a second, she seemed unsure if she should continue. Then she saw his expression. Something in her shoulders relaxed. She took the final steps and stood beside him. Standing close, he could sense her nervousness. He could feel the effort it took for her to remain composed. He wanted to say something kind, something reassuring, but words felt unnecessary. His presence was enough. The ceremony began. The official spoke calmly, guiding them through each step. The words about commitment and partnership filled the space, but for the man, everything felt distant. His focus stayed on the woman beside him. He noticed how she listened carefully, how her hands trembled slightly, how she took deep breaths to steady herself. He realized she was just as afraid as he was, afraid of rejection, of judgment, of disappointment. That realization softened him completely. When it was time to speak, his voice shook at first. He paused, took a breath, and continued. He spoke honestly, without grand promises. He spoke about respect, effort, and choosing each other every day. His words were simple, but they were real. When she spoke, her voice was steady, though emotion lingered beneath it. She spoke about hope, understanding, and the courage it took to stand there. She did not pretend the journey would be easy. She promised sincerity instead. As the ceremony came to an end, there was a brief silence. Then a few people clapped. Others joined slowly. Some remained quiet. The applause was uneven, but it existed. They were now married. As they turned to face the room together, the man felt an unexpected calm. The moment he had feared the most had passed. He had made his choice, and it felt right. Not perfect, not simple, but right. After the ceremony, reactions were mixed. Some guests approached with polite smiles and careful words. Others stayed at a distance. A few left early. The woman noticed these things, but she did not comment. She had expected this. What surprised her was his steady presence beside her. He did not drift away. He did not apologize for her existence. He stayed. When they finally had a moment alone, they exchanged their first quiet conversation as husband and wife. It was simple and slightly awkward. But there was warmth there. Relief, too. She thanked him, not with words, but with a look full of emotion. He understood. He nodded gently, as if saying, "We're okay." Outside, life continued as usual. People went on with their days. Opinions formed and spread. But inside, something important had happened. Two people had chosen courage over fear, dignity over judgment. The man knew challenges lay ahead. He knew the world would not suddenly become kind. But standing there, beside the woman who had trusted him enough to walk into an uncertain future, he felt something new. He felt proud. Not because he had proven anything to others, but because he had stayed true to himself. And that, he realized, was the strongest foundation any marriage could begin with. Life after the wedding did not suddenly become easy. In fact, the first few weeks were some of the most challenging days they had ever faced. Once the ceremony ended and the guests left, reality settled in. There were no speeches or decorations to hide behind anymore. It was just two people, sharing the same space, trying to understand each other. The man brought her to his home, a small place he had lived in alone for many years. To him it felt familiar and safe. To her it felt quiet and unknown. She walked through the room slowly, noticing how everything had been arranged for one person. There were signs of loneliness everywhere, though he had never noticed them before. One chair at the table, one cup by the sink, one side of the bed, untouched. He felt nervous watching her take it all in. He worried she might feel uncomfortable or disappointed. But she did not complain. She simply nodded and smiled politely. That small act meant more to him than words. The first days were awkward. They were polite with each other, sometimes too polite. Simple questions took effort. They both feared saying the wrong thing. Silence often filled the room, not because they had nothing to say, but because they were still learning how to exist together. Outside the house, the world was not gentle. When they went out together for the first time, the man noticed the stares immediately. People looked twice, some whispered. Some showed surprise without hiding it. He felt his body tense. He wanted to protect her, but he did not know how. She noticed, too. She had lived with judgment for a long time, so she was used to it. Still, seeing it happen beside him felt different. She worried he might feel embarrassed. She worried he might start to regret his choice. But he did something that surprised her. He walked beside her calmly. He did not rush ahead. He did not create distance between them. When people stared, he did not react. His silence was not weakness. It was confidence. At home, emotions surfaced slowly. One evening, after a long and uncomfortable outing, she finally spoke. She told him she understood if he found this difficult. She told him she would not blame him if he struggled. Her honesty was gentle, not defensive. He listened carefully. Then he told her something he had never said out loud before. He admitted that he had spent years feeling invisible. That judgment from strangers hurt, but loneliness hurt more. He told her that choosing her was not a mistake. It was a decision he stood by. That conversation changed something between them. They began to relax around each other. They started sharing meals instead of eating quietly. She cooked dishes from her culture, explaining their meanings and stories. He listened with interest, learning something new every day. In return, he showed her small routines he had followed for years, simple habits that slowly became shared habits. Challenges still appeared. Cultural differences caused misunderstandings. Sometimes they misread each other's silence. Sometimes emotions built up without warning. But instead of walking away, they talked. Slowly, carefully, honestly. Family reactions were mixed. Some relatives kept their distance. Others asked uncomfortable questions. A few tried to hide their disapproval behind polite words. The man felt anger at times, but he chose calm instead. He stopped explaining himself to people who did not want to understand. What mattered more was what happened behind closed doors. The woman showed patience he had never experienced before. She encouraged him to speak when he felt unsure. She did not mock his quiet nature. She respected it. He, in turn, made sure she felt safe. He listened when she shared her past. He did not rush her healing. He defended her when necessary, not loudly but firmly. His loyalty gave her confidence. Slowly, their home began to change. Laughter replaced silence. The table now had 2 cups. The house felt warmer, not because of decoration, but because of presence. There were still hard days. Days when judgment felt heavy. Days when doubt returned. But now, those days were faced together. When the world felt unkind, they created kindness for each other. One evening, as they sat quietly after dinner, she told him something important. She said she had expected survival, not comfort. She had prepared herself for distance, not connection. What she found instead surprised her. He did not respond immediately. He simply reached for her hand. It was a small gesture, but it carried everything he felt. Gratitude, respect, commitment. But it became real. Time moved forward, quietly and steadily. Months passed, and life continued in its ordinary way, but something important had changed. The man was no longer living just to get through the days. He was building a life with someone beside him. That simple fact gave his routines new meaning. Their mornings began to feel natural. They shared small moments, tea at the table, brief conversations, comfortable silence. These were not dramatic scenes, but they mattered. They were signs of trust. The woman learned his habits, his quiet moods, the way he needed time to think before speaking. He learned her rhythms, her emotions, and the strength she carried without showing it loudly. Outside their home, people still noticed them. Judgment did not disappear. Some reactions softened over time, while others remained unchanged. The difference now was how they handled it. They no longer faced the world separately. They faced it as a unit. The man noticed changes in himself. He stood straighter. He spoke with more confidence. He no longer felt like someone waiting on the side of life. Having a partner who believed in him helped him believe in himself. He stopped caring about proving anything to anyone else. The woman also changed. In this new life, she felt less guarded. She smiled more easily. She no longer felt like she had to apologize for taking up space. In their home, she was not judged or measured. She was accepted. That acceptance gave her peace. Their relationship was not built on grand gestures. It grew through everyday choices. Choosing patience instead of anger. Choosing understanding instead of silence. Choosing respect, even when they disagreed. They argued sometimes, like any couple. But their disagreements were never cruel. They listened. They learned when to pause and when to speak. Each conflict became a lesson, not a weapon. Slowly, others began to notice the stability between them. A few relatives who had kept their distance softened. Conversations became easier. Some people apologized without words, simply by showing up. Others remained distant, but their opinions mattered less now. One afternoon, the man overheard someone speaking about them. The words were not kind. Instead of feeling hurt, he felt calm. He realized something important. Other people's opinions no longer defined his happiness. He had found something stronger than approval. The woman noticed this change too. She saw how he handled judgment with quiet dignity. It made her respect him even more. She had expected survival. What she found was partnership. They began making plans, not grand ones, but meaningful ones. Improving their home, saving for the future, talking about what kind of life they wanted to build together. These conversations were slow and thoughtful. Neither of them rushed. One evening, as they sat together, watching the sky grow darker, the woman spoke about her fears. She admitted that she still worried sometimes. Worry about being accepted. Worry about being enough. He listened without interrupting. Then he told her something simple. He said that life had never given him everything he wanted, but it had given him what he needed at the right time. He told her she was not a mistake in his life. She was a choice. Those words stayed with her. Their story did not become famous. It did not turn into a dramatic success story, but it became something better. It became real, steady, and honest. Years later, when they looked back, the wedding day no longer felt shocking. It felt distant and small compared to everything they had built since then. What once seemed like an uncertain decision became the foundation of their strength. The man often thought about the choice he made to not ask for a photo. At the time, it felt risky. Now it felt wise. It had forced him to see beyond surface ideas and meet a person fully. The woman, too, reflected on her courage. She had walked into her room knowing she would be judged. She had chosen dignity over fear. That decision had changed her life. Together they learned that love does not always arrive in the form people expect. Sometimes it arrives quietly, asking for patience and bravery. Sometimes it asks people to stand firm when others whisper. Their happiness did not come from fitting into a standard shape. It came from mutual respect, shared effort, and the courage to choose each other every day. In the end, their life was not about proving anyone wrong. It was about proving something right for themselves.